welcome to the Q&A panel on challenges facing the agricultural industry with respect to IoT. We have Paul and Darren. Paul founded Smart Rural Co-op, and he works with stakeholders in to drive the development of sustainable businesses and to encourage businesses to be at the heart of the digital transformation in rural Scotland. Smart Rural is a user-owned cooperative, and farming is at the core of Smart Rural. Transformation at this scale requires everyone to work with the neighbors, and this is one of Paul's businesses. Darren was raised on a farm in northern Alberta, Canada, where he learned to appreciate both the rewards and the challenges of working in agriculture. He's worked since for General Electric and started several of his own businesses. He moved to Melbourne, Australia in 2007, and now has turned his focus to using technology to bring solutions to the livestock industry in Australia and to markets across the world. So Darren from Smart Paddock and Paul from Smart Rural, welcome. I'll go through and start asking questions, and I'll point to one of you. Darren, it looks like we lost you on the camera, but can you say something to see if we can hear you?
Yeah, can you still hear me okay?
We can still hear you.
Good now?
Yeah, okay.
Seems okay from my end, but we'll see.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
see Darren don't do anything dodgy.
Okay, cool. So the first question that I'm going to direct to you, Paul, first is, what are some of the biggest problems you see farmers facing in terms of digital transformation?
So I suppose, in particular in the UK, there's a perfect storm. We know we've got the climate emergency, we've got aspirations to deliver net zero, we've got changes in consumer sentiments in terms of how they source their food. And on top of that, we have Brexit, so the UK's exit from Europe and all the things that that's caused. And that's really putting a huge challenge in front of the industry. And at this point, it has no option to be sustainable. It has to change. And part of that is its digital transformation. So for us, it's working out how to make data part of the industry's transformation. And that's what we're all about. It's not the sensors, it's the data. But within that huge industry-wide context of making it embrace data, the farmers are facing very individual problems. So you've got a massive industry-wide challenge, but also you've got huge individuality at the farmer level. So that there is going to be no silver bullet. There's no killer app that's going to turn this all around. There are huge opportunities, but they're going to start with small things, basic digitization, saving time, etc. And the other thing we face is that our government sees innovation as the key rather than widespread adoption. We believe they must run in parallel, and we look at Australia as a great model for that.
Cool. Darren, maybe you have a little bit less direct interaction with farmers, or as a solutions provider, as an actual manufacturer of hardware. But in your opinion, what are some of the biggest problems you see farmers facing in terms of digital transformation?
Yeah, well, for us, because we're relatively still, early stage type company, we still do a lot of interaction directly with the farmers. Just because it's good for us to get out and farm as much as possible. But really, for uptake for farmers, a lot of it is, they're a little bit hesitant about using new technologies. They've always done things a certain way, so it's bringing in new technologies is they're a little bit not sure about it. And I think some of the technology that's come before didn't meet some of the early ag tech type solutions, didn't meet the expectations, so they're a little bit holding off. Especially for us, see some of the bigger operations, they're kind of like, we're interested in this technology or what's coming out or what's coming next, but we want to see it gain some traction first before we'll tackle it and bring it into our operations. Just because for them it's a significant cost to deploy. For us, like smart tags across 10,000 head of cattle is a massive cost for them. So there's a little bit just wait and see how it pans out, and then really start to look at what works and what doesn't work, and then take up those technologies in. Whereas of course we would like to have farmers try stuff a little bit sooner than maybe they'd be interested in doing. But yeah, that's some of the challenges we see from talking to farmers. Okay.
And Paul, if you could name one biggest hurdle to overcoming these challenges as an integrator, what would that be?
Oh, one. It's really the market's digital maturity, and then compounded that every farm is different, because even if you have a group of farms that look numerically the same, they're actually going to be different in terms of their digital maturity, and vice versa. And the big problem as an integrator is that means that, again, that phrase, there isn't a single killer app. Everything needs to be customized. And that's scary for the farmers, because they've never been faced with this huge menu. As one of them said, when somebody offers me my dinner, I expect just to get my dinner, not a 500-page a la carte menu where I design my dish myself. And I think that's a big problem, both for the tech side and the farm side, is bridging it. And that's what we try and serve as that early bridge to create informed buyers in farming. As Dan said, taking the risk out of it, but also making farming's problems understandable to tech providers. Definitely. And where the value is.
So yeah, so it sounds like kind of the individual digital maturity of farms, and the fact that everybody is at a completely different stage. So there's no single solution which somebody can step in and just solve all of the problems.
I wish there was.
Yeah, maybe at some level of maturity it'll be more like that, but now it's a lot of groundwork, I think. Yeah. And Darren, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to overcoming the challenges that you see in facing agriculture?
I mean, some of Paul's points are pretty bang on, and for us, we see that every farm is different. They have different challenges. Even when we talk about what we offer for a solution, some farmers go, if you develop this feature, this would be really interesting for us. And we talk to that about another farmer going, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this. But it's all kind of related. It's yeah, you're right. They have this huge selection. So I think it's one of the things. It's the integrators like Paul and other companies that kind of filter all that noise out of all the different solutions and go, let's take a look at your operation. What do you need? What are your problems you're having? Let's see what's out there. We'll kind of take a look and filter that and take a look at this solution, take a look at this solution, and try to put a package together for the farmers. Because yeah, it is quite overwhelming, especially. And there's also this issue with all these dashboards and things like that, where there's all these different platforms coming together, and farmers like, I don't want to see 20 different apps. I want to see one app that can do everything. But for us as solution providers, it's very challenging for us to, we can't develop a solution for everything and to integrate with other systems. But there's like 20 of those other systems. It's all very challenging. But again, it's a great challenge, and it shows that there is lots of opportunities. But yeah, for the farmers, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and I think it's just those system integrators really got to help the farmers review the technology that's out there to help implement what they work best for their operations.
I see. Yeah. So then you would say your biggest challenge as a solutions provider is probably just the huge amount of offerings that farmers have, and how difficult it is for them to decide what they want, what they don't want, and then also their, I guess, reluctance to use several different platforms. They're not like trying to do this micro solution integration.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you address that challenge?
How do we?
Yeah.
So we actually, that's, so we offer our solution directly to farmers, and that's just for farmers that are more up on top of this type of technology. But we actually start working through integrators, various integrators, very farm advisors, and organizations like that, and basically partners that will take and look at all these different solutions and pick the solutions they think is best for the farmer. So yeah, we are already working with different integrators to take our solution and make, come up with what they need for them. Plus we do integration. So We do have our own platform, so if a farmer has nothing, they can just use our platform for our solution. But if they already have some of the more popular farm management systems, we can actually feed our data into other platforms so that they don't have to have multiple dashboards. So we have that kind of a multiple options solution that we offer. And that's kind of the approach we take. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so it sounds like integrators can really help to apply knowledge that has worked on one farm, and then to sort of package that up and make it easy to understand for other integrators. And then I guess you have a basically endless task of trying to support every single software that farmers
we do
might
try to
be
restrict who we
Yeah.
support and how we support it, but yes.
Yeah. How do you evaluate like the sort of market potential of a new integration, for example?
It's basically on the side, if it's a big multi-farm operation, then that's more, makes more sense. Or if it's a platform that's very popular, either in Australia or overseas. So we just look and see what's the most popular or what makes most sense for the solution they need. If there's a need, we'll solve it, but it has to be significant enough for us to tackle. Yeah.
Okay.
This is where sort of we try and add value. Smart Rural is a user-owned co-op. It's part of the agricultural co-op community in Scotland, which is very strong. So sort of that access to market is also something that just trying to facilitate the whole process of making rural work smarter. We're not going to provide end-to-end solutions unless we absolutely have to. We want to find people like Darren who can add value, and we just simplify the process, give the farmers a single login, everything's under there, and try and make his life simpler and but smarter at the same time.
I see. So the next question is, what is awareness like in terms of digitalization potential, especially for LoRaWAN? Do you feel like you're explaining to people digitalization 101, or are people pretty aware and pretty excited about the potential of digitalization?
It can be high amongst the early adopters. So if you think about your digital maturity, technical adoption, if you're an early adopter, you get data, you're not afraid of technology. But being generous, farming population, that's probably about 5%. The other 95%, now they're just trying to do it the way their father did it. And the problem for us is compounded that farmland, the vast majority, is the wrong side of the digital divide. So even if they wanted to gather data, there is no telecoms infrastructure in place in Scotland for the vast majority of farms to get data. So they'll just do it with pen and paper. And so, no, there's pretty low understanding. And we're trying to get the message out about us. And then if somebody's interested and you think it won't turn them off, you can tell them how. But the first thing is, yeah, we can add value. We can make your life easier.
Okay. Is that an easy sell in general?
Not really, because I don't think anybody wants to be told what they need. You need to sit, I mean, metaphorically or really, you sit at the farm table with a cup of tea and a bunch of biscuits, and you ask them what bugs their happiness. Then you introduce them to solutions and ideas. And if any click, you then go, okay, well, this is how we do it. We're going to stick the gear on your shed. And then they're suddenly part of the digital generation. But you can't talk to them about IoT and devices. At the best, it's about data. But at the end of the day, it's really about value and making their life easier.
That's a really good point. That you can't solve problems that people don't see as problems. Interesting. So say you visit a farmer and they do all of the data collection on pen and paper. Do you then come in and say, hey, I mean, we could save you a ton of time, or do you just sort of let it go unless it seems like they bring that up as a pain point?
The easiest way to sell to any farmer is show them another farmer who's happy.
Okay.
That's
Peer
why
pressure.
we set up 3 or 4 digital farms, and that gives us the opportunity, if we've spoken to a farm and go, well, actually, you should talk to this guy and see how his working life has changed. And now COVID has made a big problem because we can't have big agricultural events where we can roll these people out or go to their farms. But it is that nothing sells to another farmer like a happy farmer.
Okay.
Also, the thing that can torpedo your whole business is a dissatisfied farmer.
Okay.
So your early adopters, you have to nurture them. Yeah, there'll be problems, but deal with them rapidly and collectively with them. But yeah, the sell is not easy to a farmer. It's best done by another farmer. But at the end of the day, you've got to give them something that gives them value, no matter what that is. And it isn't pounds and dollars. It's actually time, peace of mind, worker welfare. All of those things are really valuable. And the money comes later.
I see.
But, yeah.
And it sounds like it's a very, I think probably a lot of marketplaces are like this, but it's a very social landscape actually. So what other people do has a big impact on how it's perceived. And Darren, do you have anything to add there?
I just want to totally agree with Paul on that. It's farmers. It's definitely farmer to farmer. There's so much of that goes on. They'll look at some of the leader farmers and the early adopters and see what they're doing, and if they're successful, the farmers aren't really competing with each other. They're not competing with each other, so they're happy to share what works and actually what doesn't work. As Paul was saying too, you want to make sure you really support them, and for us, it's getting those trial farms going. We do work with industry bodies to do, again, more of these smart farm demonstrations, but also going to ag events, even though you said not as many is happening right now. But farmers really want to touch and feel the products if there's a physical part of the product, and they don't like to buy anything physical without actually touching and feeling it and thinking, oh yeah, this is rugged enough to work on my farm. I'm willing to give it a go. But yeah, I think that farmer to farmer is a massive way of doing it.
Okay. Next question. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but Paul, how do you sort of evangelize others to build use cases on coverage that you've deployed? Do you come into a particular region, set up LoRaWAN coverage, and then try to get people to build stuff on it? Or
yeah, I mean, with the restrictions of COVID, it meant we couldn't do the traditional events, which is the big agricultural shows, getting people to go to our farms. So we've done it through webinars and things like that. And the core is you find a progressive farmer, Darren's talked about, sort of who's, touch it, can understand it. We then help them take the risk out of it for early adopters. And this is where we'd like government to do that as well, because people are, am I going to invest, whatever. But then take them through it and get them to be a spokesperson. We can do a certain amount of evangelizing, but in a way, most of our evangelizing is pointing outwards to the tech suppliers to say, don't be afraid of rural. It's a great business opportunity. You've just got to think about it differently. So in a way, our farmers evangelize within the community. We'll do messaging to the co-ops and through them to members. But real evangelizing, it's probably with the tech companies and digitally mature entities like utility companies. You can evangelize with them. With the farmers, it can, it doesn't quite work that way.
And how do you handle things like provisioning and key management at scale? So a lot of these sort of nitty-gritty logistical things.
I mean, when we were in the early days of setting up Smart Rural, we looked at all different technologies, the competitors, we won't list them, and we pretty quickly came to the conclusion that we were going to need to set up a private network for ourselves to do what we needed to do. We spoke to a lot of the big commercial providers, and we ended up going with TTI. And part of the benefit and the rationale for going with the things industry is they actually understood our problem of making rural work and being a startup. And then that very quickly gave us the structures to manage the network, but allow us to build it sporadically farm by farm. Then that gave us the tools for mass groupings of devices. And I think everything was there early on. It probably now with TTN version 3, you've got a lot of that. Yeah, and yes, but being practical, we do see maintenance issues for items. We select by destruction, I suppose. Not all sensors are meant to transfer to a farming environment. Cattle do things that you don't want to know about, but and this is good where we can share peer-to-peer with other people on this journey and find out which are the most robust devices. But yeah, we have to accept that there is in-field maintenance. Rain gauges, we've learned to that at certain times of the year, birds will use them as a perch to eat slugs. That slime is hellish to clean out. So we're on a learning process all the time with what nature and people will throw at the instruments. But yeah, provisioning and management, I think, is there under V3, which is great. It's now really the practicality of making the devices survive.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of my job is trying to make those processes easier. So it's good to hear.
It's really good now.
So last of my list of questions for Darren is, I think anybody who is interested in entering the LoRaWAN market, especially as a solutions provider, would want to know, how do you for your solutions and get your products actually on farms?
Like I said, we did a lot of ag events when we could. Some of them gone virtual. We try to work with industry bodies. So we work a lot here in Australia. It's Meat and Livestock Australia, which is the main industry body for red meat and livestock. So trying to work. So we have a big project to deploy across multiple farms, again, as trials and to show what you can do with these technologies. And really just getting out there, getting out to these events. There's a lot of ag events and there's a lot of ag tech events nowadays. So it's really, it's really up the level of what's out there. Like farmers have much more opportunity to go to these events now, and that there's actually ag tech events being hosted that farmers are invited to. That's fantastic. So they can come see the latest technologies, see what's out there, see what might work for them, talk to either researchers or industry body representatives to see what's out there. Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities like that for farmers to see what we're doing. And again, like I said before, working with the integrators is also a big one. So a lot of these farm advisors will come in, take a look at your operation, think about, this is good, you can improve this part of your operation. There's some ag tech that might be relevant that could help you. I already know about it. I've seen it deployed on this farm and this farm. Maybe have a chat with them. So that's how we really get out there. And we've had pretty good success so far. There's a lot of talk, again, between the different bodies, industries, representatives, and farmers themselves.
Great to hear. Yeah, so it sounds like obviously really getting out there, attending conferences. Okay, I basically reached the end of my list of questions, and so I'm going to go to the comments here. Bombard you guys with. Here we have a quite specific one. Maybe Paul, you can take a shot at it. So Avishek asks, if we have 1 acre of land and we want to measure the soil moisture, how many sensors would we require for this 1 acre of land? Is there a mathematical formula? What's the optimal distance to place sensors away from each other?
I see Ben's taken an answer to that, and I think I agree. It depends on the field, how variable the field is, and I think this is where farmers help. They will know that there are parts of the field which are traditionally drier and wetter than others. And so you need to understand the variability that's within the field. So there may be experimentation, first of all, that you over-instrument, find from your data that you could do with maybe only half of them or 10% to see the variation. But fundamentally, you have to understand what's the question you're trying to answer that will drive different actions. So if your irrigation system can only blanket irrigate,
doesn't really matter
then you only have one or two sensors. And I think Renia said the most important thing is at depth around the root zone, so you understand there. If you can be very precise and have multiple valves and drip feed, then you would have more sensors, because that data will help you control where the water goes. So it's really, what's the fundamental question? In Scotland, we don't irrigate wheat, so there's no zero is the answer. In potatoes, we use large bulk units, so it's only having a handful. If you get into horticulture, it's bed by bed. So it really depends on the operation and what's the actionable question you're trying to answer. Sorry, it doesn't give a direct formula, but it is. There's no point in gathering data unless it drives decisions and action.
Definitely, yeah. Just start with the what you can actually do about it, I guess, and then work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Darren will know all about decision rather than precision, or P to D, precision to decision, which is a huge piece of work done in Australia a few years ago, which was exactly about that. How do we get data to make decisions rather than just be precise?
That's right. You need, again, with all this stuff, you have to start with the problem first, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And talk about irrigation. What's, depends on the crop, depends on what you're trying. What's your problem you're trying to solve? Then go backwards to see what data you need to solve it, and then the sensors together the data, right?
And also, I guess in some cases, how much you can actually, what your level of precision in terms of. How much you can actually irrigate. Like Paul said, if you can only blanket irrigate, then that information is not going to be very actionable anyway.
Yeah, because again, on the irrigation one, I think Rencie's asked about sort of what depth for a coconut farm.
Yeah,
you need to measure at various depths, know where your roots are, and then see what different irrigation patterns make a difference. You may find you're only ever irrigating the top 5 inches, and the roots are at 10. You have to change what you do. So, yeah. Same with nitrates. That'd be an interesting one.
Okay, we have a question from Phil. What role does DEFRA policy play here? I don't know what that is. Paul, do you?
I'm trying to find Phil's original question. Oh, DEFRA, yeah.
Yeah, DEFRA.
Okay, yeah, so DEFRA is the UK's Department for Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs. So, okay. There is, I think I mentioned earlier, DEFRA and other UK bodies quite often and are ongoing putting money into innovation. So there is literally something called the FIP, Farming Innovation Programme. For the first time, it has promised that it will also have an adoption fund, but they're having difficulty figuring out how to run it, and that won't be with us for another year. So we're going to have another round of funding. So DEFRA influences where that money goes into innovation, but also DEFRA are part of the policing of how we manage land. So pollution, good land management, etc. So they're sort of a policy maker and compliance body. Yeah, I think with Phil's point where he was asking whether tax breaks for IoT trials, grants for trials, at the moment, no grants that we're really aware of. You can innovate, but in terms of, as I said, the 95% of the adoption curve is where we need to focus to have the results for net zero, etc. There is nothing. Tax breaks is potentially another way, although a lot of the farms don't make money and therefore don't pay tax. It's not an instant win, but yeah, Phil, love you to help us campaign with DEFRA and the wider government to try and get something put into adoption. enviously, we look at New South Wales and other places in Australia.
Didn't think we were doing so great, but yeah, that was fantastic.
Well, I mean,
Just
I
a little
heard,
bit of
was it
perspective.
48 million Australian dollars over the next 4 years into adoption?
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could definitely make a big difference if the governing bodies really want to support it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, last two questions. One from Eric. What are the best ways to monitor carbon sequestration in soil?
Okay, we've looked at this, and at the moment we are not aware of an instrument that can measure the carbon content. It is a sample in the lab. Now, somebody on the call may be able to tell us that it's different. It is also one that, when constructing a use case, we struggle, because when you're looking at the time scale of carbon sequestration, what can you do that directly moves the needle of the amount of carbon sequestered? And that's the difficult thing. It's a bit like online nitrogen monitoring. What can you actually do that changes what that sensor sees in a positive way? It is something that we're trying to work on, because net zero and natural capital are huge things in agriculture. So anything that can look at quantification of these resources is useful, but actually probably it's more important to look at the quality of your management of those natural resources. So you would find something indirect rather than actual carbon sequestration, understanding what the practices are to increase that, and then you can measure them. And then your lab sample says, yes, you have.
Okay.
So direct measurement, Eric, I'm not aware of anything that we can do, and it's hard to see how you would work it into that measure and action loop.
Gotcha. And the last question, just so everybody knows, all the sessions and the presentations on the stages will be shared afterwards on YouTube, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Feel free to jump back and forth. But yeah, the last question we have is about multicast. Do you find a use for multicast in these LoRaWAN solutions that you set up on farms?
Oof. Now we've gone well outside my technical knowledge there, I'm afraid. I think that's Mohammed that's asked that question. Yeah, I should have explained I have no technology background. My background is in getting people to work together. So Darren may answer that.
Maybe. I have a little bit of technology background. We've actually looked at both for different cases. So we have sensors obviously on cows for tracking, and we do have the bidirectional communication with the devices. But sometimes we want to send. Normally, we send a specific message, like we're Class A devices, to a single device. But sometimes we might want to send a message to all the devices. So we're actually looking at both cases, and it's basically what we're trying to do. If we're trying to send an update to all about something specific about a mode or something for all of them, then yeah, the multicast. But then most of our communication is unique, direct to each tag, which is kind of, I like that. This is, for us, we think it's pretty cool that you can actually talk to a device sitting on a cow in the middle of Paddock on the other side of the world, literally, and have it and control it, and like not control the cow, but control the devices to make changes and stuff like that. We just think that technology through the LoRaWAN and the things industries network is amazing, and the stuff we can do because of that, I think is fantastic. So it's pretty impressive technology, this stuff on these very large properties for us.
Yeah, it definitely, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I asked about the awareness of these digital solutions, because it seems to me like you can create a lot of you can actually you can do things more quickly, you can learn more quickly, and so there's a lot of potential, I think, in this digital transformation. And that's the end of my questions. Thank you so much, Darren. Thank you so much, Paul. I hope that was valuable for everybody. And the presentations are going on the stage. We'll have one more Q&A panel like this at 2:40, I think. But other than that, I'll see everybody in the conference.